What's going on, everybody? Welcome into another edition of the Round Ball Roundup with Sunbelt Report himself, Zach Capps. How we doing, man?
Yeah, I mean, pretty good. Not too much to talk about this week because we usually take like every other week, so we got a bunch to talk about. But we got like 2 games to talk about today, so
yeah, not a ton, but definitely a few surprises as we went through the week. We know the most obvious one, and we'll get to that in a minute. Shout out to our sponsors real quick: W Energy, Fanplex Graphics, TSN Off-Road, and as always, Dano's Seasoning as well. We're going to keep it a little bit short and sweet tonight because we want people to be able to take this in and listen to this before the weekend matchups on Saturday, so people can kind of quick listen, a little shorter than usual. We'll still kind of hit some of the same points, just not spend as much time on it. It gotten warmer down there where you are too, Zach, right? I mean, we're up here in the 60s in the Triangle area. Is it even warmer down there?
Yeah, it was. I think that the high for today is 78 or 73. Wow. 73.
That's still crazy.
It was. I woke up at 9 o'clock and it was already like 65 degrees outside.
Everybody wearing shorts and short sleeves to class
again.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the morning was still a little chilly just because of the wind, but middle of the day it was really nice outside with the sun out and everything.
Nice. Not windy at all down there? Well, I guess it's almost windy, huh?
I mean, not really. Like, obviously, when you get closer to the beach, it gets really windy. But, I mean, Conway's a good 20 miles away from the beach, so it's not, like, terribly windy.
Nice. All right. Yeah, I mean, I've been there once, so I guess I don't have the most experience, but I always, just like everybody, I think, kind of eclipse Myrtle Beach and Conway into one thing. And
it's just easier just to say Myrtle Beach. Like, someone asked, like, someone asked me where's Coastal at, I'd just say Myrtle Beach because they're never going to know what Conway is.
True. It's a good point. I mean, I know people pick on Conway a little bit because not necessarily Conway, but Coastal, because it's not at Myrtle Beach or in Myrtle Beach technically. But I actually, when I've driven through, I like the little small town feel of Conway. So
it's kind of not even in Conway either.
Oh, really?
It's like 5 miles away from downtown Conway. It's like pretty much in between. There's like, yeah, it's like a tiny little like island campus. That's what they call it, where it's just like it's not like, for example, like a lot of these college cities are just like the whole city's the college basically.
Right.
Like not here. It's like we have like a little like island where all the stuff is, and then 5 miles away here is Conway, and then 20 miles away is Myrtle Beach. So it's like kind of like in the middle a little bit.
Nice. Yeah, I mean, it gives you a little bit of everything, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing that sucks is there's like 2 bars and like a couple restaurants, but other than that, you have to drive to go anywhere.
Yeah,
you can't like walk somewhere.
Yeah, and you probably have to deal with all the tourists driving, which is probably never fun.
Oh yeah, 501 is terrible.
Yeah, that's I've lived in one. Boone's kind of a winter destination compared to Conway and Coastal, where it's more of a warm destination. But yeah, you get the people driving up there, don't know what they're doing, not familiar with the area. I mean, a lot of people that probably listen to this show are in those same types of places, and it's
even with just all the people just moving here in general, and then you add on top tourists, it's terrible. The traffic.
Yeah, it's not getting any better.
No, it's just only getting worse.
Yep, sure is. We'll get over to the graphic side of thing. Nothing real fancy this week. A couple surprises, but I kind of went with a cluster in the middle. We'll get over to the standings here quickly because we've got a lot of movement. And as you'll see, if you're looking at this compared to what you're seeing on the Sunbelt website, on ESPN, I believe, okay, so I will kind of reference the fact that I have tried to go with what I perceive to be the correct tiebreakers procedure-wise. So they will not match up, especially the ESPN one, will not match up with what you're seeing on screen now. Because I believe, for the most part, there may be some toss-ups in there, especially when the teams haven't played each other. For instance, App State and Marshall, they have yet to play, so their 6-4 record that has them tied. You have to pull out like the third and fourth tie breaks to figure out who really should be above or below each other. So take it with a little bit of a grain of salt because I'm not the probably the best expert, but I have taken my best stab at it. All right, that's a wordy explanation on the standings so far. But Zach, the team that we kind of assumed to be on top all season is back in probably their rightful home at this point, right?
Yeah, they're starting to take off. South Alabama's cooled down and kind of coming back down to earth where we expected them. And Arkansas State's just starting to show that why they were preseason number one.
Yeah, absolutely. 8-2 record, 17-5 overall, trailed somewhat closely by Troy. I guess going into this week, before all the games happened, I don't know where Troy was going to go, right? Could they fall a little bit further, or did they kind of get back up top? I believe they're back on a 3-game win streak now at this point. Is that? Let me double check that math. Yes, 3-game win streak. So, hey, they're getting hot too, right? There are 6 wins away already from another 20-win season. They look like they may be primed to do so. And let's see. Yeah, impressive home record. They sit at 9-3 at home, but their struggles on the road, it's kind of similar to Arkansas State. A little above 500, right? I mean, like these teams are 5-3 and 5-4 on the road. So
that's how, just in college basketball this year as a whole, like almost everyone is struggling on the road this year, just across the whole sport.
And I remember looking at that stat last year in the Sun Belt specifically, and it was pretty bad, even for the teams, besides the top 3, maybe 4 teams, the road records across the board in the Sun Belt were not too good. So it's interesting to see that it's kind of playing out that same way again. I don't even know. I don't think there's a single good-looking road record.
When you're traveling, like they don't travel just for like one game and then come back. Like you travel for 4 or 5 days, depending on where you go. So that kind of just throws you completely out of rhythm. And sometimes a lot of these teams, I wouldn't say a lot, but I know at least a couple of these teams, they don't like fly to places especially like Coastal, for example. They drove to Georgia, I think Georgia State, and then drove all the way up to ODU or something last week. Yeah. So it's not like they're like flying everywhere. Like a lot of these teams are trying to save money any way they can driving, which just makes it even worse.
Yeah, it does. That would not be an easy trip. From me here in the Triangle area, it's a 6-hour drive to get to Atlanta. So if they came from Atlanta to Norfolk, you're probably looking at 8.5 hours, 9 hours in a bus.
They drove from Georgia Southern to ODU.
Oh, Georgia Southern. Oh, wow, that's even worse.
Even farther. Because I know they stopped in between. They stopped at Duke and practiced at Duke.
Oh, okay. Like they stayed the night in Duke at least once?
I don't think so. I think they just stopped and practice and got the legs loose and stuff.
Oh,
I'm pretty sure they did the same thing on their way up to JMU. According to the broadcast, they stopped at High Point and practiced at High Point. Just kind of like break up the travel instead of sitting in a car or bus for, let's just say, 6 hours. You get 3 hours and then you're off the bus for 2-3 hours. Then you're back on it for 3 more hours.
Yeah, that does not sound fun. And you're right. Like with these athletes, you don't want them coming in cold. It's not going to play to any benefit. But yeah, so as I was looking down to reiterate the fact of the road records, the 5-3 for Arkansas State and the 5-4 for Troy are literally the best 2 road records in the conference. You have South at 4-4, and let's see, I think it's Old Dominion's at 4-2, and everybody else is at 500 or below. And some of them are very far under 500. Those bottom teams there, 1-9, 2-8, 2-10. Georgia State is 1-7 on the road. So not playing to anyone's advantage to get away from home. Like you said, you're going on stretches. I know that it didn't seem to feel the same way last year, but I'm sure it was. It's just something I'm not remembering off the top of my head. These 3 and 4 game stretches where the team plays at home that many feel kind of strange.
Coastal doesn't. They played last game they played at home was the 18th. They don't play again at home until the 5th of February.
That's crazy.
That's a lot of travel.
Yeah,
in that short of time, especially if they're driving everywhere.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Do they have any West Coast games in that swing or anything? Or not West Coast, but West Division games, kind of.
No, they went. So The last game was at home against Marshall, and then they went Georgia Southern, ODU, JMU, and Marshall again.
Okay. That Marshall trip's probably a little lengthy from Coastal.
Well, I mean, they're just going to stay because they played JMU yesterday, so they'll play Marshall tomorrow.
That's a good point. Yeah, they don't have to go all the way back and then all the way around. So smart move on their part. All right, so we've really not talked specifically besides Arkansas State and Troy. So we'll get into the 5 teams that are tied with 6-4 records. And again, grain of salt here, but I believe roughly at this point I've got this correct that ODU would claim the 3rd spot, South Alabama, the 4th, App State after them, James Madison, and then Marshall. ODU has beaten South Alabama, and they split with App State, and I think they split with JMU.
They still play JMU. They haven't played JMU at home yet, I don't think.
Oh, they only played them once. Okay. Yeah, see, that's where it's tricky, man. There's just when it's like 2 teams and you got to split it up, it's pretty easy, right? Mostly head-to-head, and then I usually think the next tiebreaker is the obvious first tiebreaker is the record. Second tiebreaker is head-to-head. I think the third tiebreaker is your win-loss record against the best team in the conference as it sits at that moment. So that would be obviously Arkansas State, Troy, and then all these teams that are tied. So it's really hard because a couple of them, like I said, App State and Marshall have yet to play each other. App State has beaten JMU twice. So they definitely hold that tiebreaker over JMU in that regard. But, then JMU beats ODU, so you would think JMU should be above them, but you can't. I don't.
Yeah, it's just a mess.
It's a jumbled mess. But I did take my best stab at it to give us some sort of accurate picture as it currently stands. But most of those overall records look pretty good out there to the side, right? You've got 14-8 for South. App is at 12-9. JMU 13-9. Marshall at 13-10. The one that's an outlier is ODU, who's kind of gone on that good run, had a couple games not go their way, and then jump back up with that victory over App State. But their overall record sits at just 10-12. The only really outlier there, it's Texas State over here on the other side of the standings, as we have it pictured here, specifically sits at 5-5, but they're 12-10 overall. It seems like they should be more over to that left side with those other top teams with the overall. But that's why conference games are so important, right, Zach?
Yeah, and I have a question for you. Out of all those 6-4 teams, who do you think at their best is the 3rd best team in the conference? Because I think we can agree Arkansas State and Troy are 1 and 2.
Yes, I would definitely say that.
Who do you think out of those 6-4 teams, if they all played their best, who do you think is the true 3rd best team?
If they all played their best, then that's man. I am wearing the black and gold colors, and when App State has looked good, I do believe that they look pretty good. But ODU went in there and beat them, and they were shorthanded, right? They had like a very short bench. They had a couple guys sick. I think they had at least one injury as well. South played a feisty, scrappy ULM team. I honestly might favor, because of the makeup of the team, I might favor Marshall, which is funny because they're technically showing as last in this picture here. But I kind of like the makeup of the bigs, the shooters, what they could be capable of, and kind of more maybe a consistent look where App State's kind of been hot and cold. Same thing with ODU, right? They've been really hot, and then they've been kind of cooler on some games. And South's cool right now. But let's reverse that question to you too. And James Madison, I mean, you can't forget JMU. The pedigree is there. You've got the newer head coach. You're going to have some learning things with a new coaching staff and maybe a new system, a lot of new players. So I don't think you could count them out. Well, what are your thoughts on that?
I think I'll take App State. I think because I think at their best, I think they're going to have the 2 best players on the court in pretty much any game with Tate and Huntley. Because especially if Huntley, with that stretch he had where he was just knocking down threes left and right.
Yeah.
And then we obviously know what Tate can do, scoring the ball, but he's been a really good facilitator too this year. So pretty much against anyone they play, other than probably Troy and Arkansas State, they're going to have 2 best players on the court. So I think at their best, they're probably the 3rd best team. But yeah, I think I like JMU too, even though they were pretty. They got a win last night against Coastal, but they were pretty ugly. But
yeah, that was a little closer than I would have thought going in.
they have three. I mean, they have three guards: Lindsey, Freeman, and Brown, who any three of those can take over a game at any point in time just because they're that good. So, yeah. I mean, that's a team to look out for too, I think. But like I said, it was pretty ugly last night, even though they got a win.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, I like Obina Anachili Killen. Like, I like his game. I like where he's been for Marshall. I just had a couple weird games, but I like the makeup of that team. But yeah, I mean, if App State could get like one more player to be a little bit more consistent, because they've had like Threadgill step up and have a good game, then he kind of disappears, and Bobrin will come up and have a good game. But if they could get a third guy in there that's consistently double digits, grabbing a good amount of rebounds, I think they could be up there to the top right quickly. I mean, they could have had that game against ODU. They did not perform very well down the stretch when it mattered to get back in there and take over control. They were in control early. They were up like double digits very, very early in the game. Let ODU storm back, and then after that, it was just back and forth, and ODU beat them to the punch a couple times at the very end. Some sloppy play, some missed free throws by App. Makes you pay. And now you see how important that game was too, right? When App drops that game, you're like, man, that was a really bad loss, right? Because ODU's shorthanded. You're playing at home. And then you've got some stuff that went your way the rest of the week. And now if you're looking at being tied with Troy up there for second place instead of in this jumbled mess at 6-4 with everybody else, that could have been a huge game for them. And they let it slip away. So that was an interesting one. But yeah, that was a great question, man. Thanks for asking that, because that is tough. I really, after Saturday's games, I feel like I probably give you a different answer than what we just got. But what do you think about these two teams tied at 5-5 who just played head to head recently here with the Cajuns and Texas State going up against one another?
I mean, I like Texas State. Like I said, I saw them in person a bunch at the Myrtle Beach Invitational, and I thought they looked really good. But I mean, they've just had injuries all year long. Like, there's always like at least one person out every single game. Yeah. So that's tough. And then Louisiana, I mean, Derek Zimmerman's doing his best to try to say like he deserves a job, or at least a look, with him being the interim. So that's an interesting storyline to watch forward going into the offseason.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Again, what we talked about with the overall records, Texas State should be well above Louisiana when you look at the overalls, with 12-10 overall versus 7-15, but Louisiana technically above them with, I think, the head-to-head is actually tied, right? I think they split already. I think they've played each other twice, right?
Try to check.
Yeah, we checked that. I'm pretty sure they have, and I had to go down to like the third tiebreak, which I think Texas State beat like two teams that are ranked higher. I don't think they've played Troy or Arkansas State just yet.
They played twice. They split. Both the away teams won both those.
That is an interesting fact. We just talked about away game struggles, and both of them won away from home. So it's kind of fitting, though, because these teams are just kind of weird when you've got the overall records what they are and sitting both at 5-5. So interesting. I think long term, I'm still favoring the Bobcats because of like you said, if they could get healthy, I think they're a pretty strong team that could end up much closer to the top of this conference than where they are currently situated. But I guess we will see. 3 teams tied at 4-6 after that, including Georgia State, Southern Miss, and Georgia Southern. Georgia State coming out on top of those 3 teams as far as I was concerned with the tie breaks, and all very similar overall records. So it kind of makes sense that they're all kind of hovering around that same spot. I'll flip the question you asked me for the bigger 6-4 tied records, and now we got the 4-6. So out of these 3 teams, is there one that you think could go on a run and get back up closer to the top, or you think these all kind of stay in this area? You don't think they're strong enough to kind of make any kind of jump up?
I still like Georgia Southern. Maybe it's just from what I thought about them coming into the season. But I just like their team in general. I like Dante Holloman a lot. Saw him in person. That guy can get a bucket on anybody. That guy, he's quick. He's shifty. He's smart. And I think out of those three, I think they're the most well-rounded from bigs to guards. Southern Miss, they have a lot of talent, but they don't really have bigs. I mean, Denijay Harris is their biggest player, and he's maybe the conference player of the year, but I mean, he's like 6'8", and that's their biggest guy. They just play a bunch of wings and guards, which kind of scares me if you're going to go up against a team with quality bigs. So I'll probably lean Georgia Southern.
Yeah, I'm not in total disagreement with that. I would say that the thing that I want to lean on is the fact that I picked Southern Miss to do so well this season. I feel like I have to stick with that pick, right? Like you said, they have the capable talent on the court, but it seems like it's not all connecting at one time. There might be Harris seems like the most, or it doesn't seem like, he is the most consistent player on the team, continually leading them in scoring and likely rebounds and other statistics there. But I just don't understand how some of these other guys have like a good game here and there, but they can't stay a little bit more consistent to kind of give them that more well-rounded look and be a little bit more competitive in some of these matchups that they've been in. So
Georgia State is really streaky too. If they get hot, we saw it last night.
Yeah,
they can beat anybody if they get hot, but it's just they're super streaky.
Yeah, and if you look at their home and away record, it's just crazy. Like they're 6-6 at home, so even their home record not great, and they're 1-7 on the road, and they're still sitting here at 4-6, which is 2 games back of that jumbled mess that's kind of in the middle, I guess you could say. There, it's just a strange way to look at it when you look at those breakdowns, but then you see them not at the total bottom of this thing. So. Very interesting. ULM 2-8, Coastal 1-9. What do you have to say about those two teams? I mean, I guess obviously we're talking about ULM a little bit more with what they've just done to South Alabama over these past 2 games. Is that the corner? Have they flipped it? Have they rounded into form and they're going to be a lot more competitive the rest of the way? Or you think that's kind of fluky and just a bad matchup for South Alabama?
I mean, I didn't watch either of the games. I saw the end of the first one, I think, a little bit, but I didn't watch either of them, so I can't really say much. But I think they might have just caught South Alabama sleeping. Like when you come into these games and you see a team with ULM's record and how they played all year, you kind of just take it for granted. And I don't think they're up to par. Maybe they just have their numbers. Maybe it's just how the matchup goes. Like maybe they just match up really well against a team like South Alabama. But I can't say for 100% if they've fully turned the corner or not.
Yeah, so just going back through some of their losses before this little win streak, it's only 2 games, so it's not like they're not on a 4 or 5 game streak. I'm not saying they're all of a sudden going to be battling for the top spot. But if you look back, a 5-point loss to ODU, who's obviously up there towards the top right now, an 8-point loss to Georgia Southern. They got beat by Coastal pretty badly. That was a 70-51. So that's kind of a surprising loss if you think that they're competitive in some of these other matchups. Close loss to Louisiana, and then they played Louisiana twice already. Both relatively close losses. App State was a battle. I watched that one specifically. I thought App very well could lose that game. That game, App State shot better from 3 than they did from the floor. I don't know if I've ever really remember seeing something like that before. I thought it was kind of crazy, especially because that game previously App State shot terribly from 3. But yeah, against South Alabama, I watched the first game and didn't watch last night. We were doing that live show. If you haven't checked that out, by the way, it's a really interesting thing. Yes, when you look at it from the outside, it's about a mascot, but it's so much more than that. So be sure to check that out if you haven't tuned into that one. But yeah, that matchup, that first one with South Alabama, it did not look like South Alabama was ever like that much better of a team, right? Like, and I don't know, like you said, is that an X's and O's thing when you break it down? Someone that's more of an expert on looking at things that way in the basketball sense says like, oh, specifically, this guy's never going to match up well against the way that this person plays the game or whatnot. I'm not an analytical person when it comes to basketball to diagnose that and give you guys a good answer on that. But yeah, it was tightly competitive throughout, and ULM looked like the better team down the stretch. And it sounds like last night's game was somewhat similar, a little bit closer, obviously. But yeah, I mean, it'd be interesting to see if they can keep going on a run. That their matchups coming up are not necessarily easy, but it's not the hardest road. They travel to Troy this weekend. We'll get into these weekend matchups next. And then they play Georgia State, Texas State, Southern Miss, Texas State again. And then they have a little bit of a murderer's road to end the season because they go to Arkansas State, James Madison, and then Arkansas State at home. So they need to go on the run now in case they can't beat Arkansas State at the end, because I think that one's going to be very, very difficult for them to overcome. And anything you want to say specifically on Coastal before we move on to some of the weekend matchups here?
I found this stat, or I didn't find it. I was looking at it. Coastal is, can you try to guess their record when they hold teams under 70 versus when the other team scores 70 plus?
Ooh, I won't cheat. I won't pull up their record over here because I could do that.
Well, they're 8-14, but
but I mean they're game by game.
Okay.
Geez, they're holding the opponent to under 70. Is that what the stat was?
Yeah. I mean, either way, or if the other team scores more than 70.
Oh, I got you. I'm guessing if they're holding the opponent under 70, they have a pretty good record.
They're 8-2 if the opponent scores under 70 points. If they score 70, the other team scores 70 plus, they're 0-12.
Wow. That's crazy. I mean, obviously, like mathematically, it just makes sense, but the fact that it's so heavily tilted in either direction there is.
I mean, that's why last night's game was close, because they kept JMU in a low scoring game. They make it dirty. That's what they want to do, and
that's just the style of play that they've got there. Yeah, that's a crazy stat. Thanks for finding that. That's one of those ones that's just like kind of crazy to think about from here.
Yeah, they're best when they keep the game because they don't have enough offensive firepower to keep up with teams, so they have to dirty it up and make it ugly.
Yeah, it kind of makes sense though, because you always hear that rhetoric: defense wins championships.
I mean, at the beginning of the season, they were doing that like really well.
Yeah.
And they've kind of gotten away from that in conference play. That's why they're 1-9, because they haven't won a game when the other team scores more than 70.
Makes sense. That's crazy though. I mean, the fact that it's kind of like a fine line there at 70 points, that's nuts. Thanks for that good little tidbit there, man. And we'll go now to kind of the weekend matchups. Again, big games on Saturday. Kind of across the board here, quite a few really good matchups. And even if they aren't record versus record amazing, it's somebody that might be hot at the same time, specifically that one in the middle there that we'll get to in a second. But first off, to kick it off, 1 p.m. tip, 12 Central Time on ESPN Plus. We've got Georgia State. I believe I got these right, heading to App State, right? Is that what?
I think the right is at home.
Okay. Yes, that's right. Just wanted to make sure I put them in the right spot. So I had to now check back over there. App State, I mean, like you said, Huntley and Tate can take over a game and win it. But as you just mentioned, Georgia State can be a little streaky. But App's playing back at home now. I don't know. I guess they just dropped that game at home against ODU, though. So you favoring anybody real heavily here? You think this is going to be a tight contest?
I think it can be a tight game, but I'll lean App State at home, a bounce back game for the Mountaineers.
I'm going to do the same. I think that Kearns so far in his tenure, it seems, has responded pretty well to losses, gotten his team to get riled back up and not drop too many in a row. And they're going to honestly look at these standings and look at these records and realize we can't let another one slip away because we got some help that we needed to stay kind of where we're at in the standings. So I don't think you can get away with that too many more times, though. So I'll lead App State back at home in that one as well. ODU, back to the Royal Rivalry. ODU travels to JMU, 4 p.m. Eastern, 3 Central Time, ESPN Plus. Is it payback time for the Monarchs? They continue a roll after that win over App State, or JMU get the better of them a second time this season?
I'll lean JMU in this one. Like I said, tough game, but they're going to be up for this big rivalry. And ODU is traveling from App State, so that'll put a little bit of mileage on their legs. So I'll lean JMU again.
I am going to lean JMU, a little bit different of a reason, but kind of similar in some regard. ODU's kind of weakened right now, right? We've got some guys out with sicknesses and injuries. They weren't 100% against App. They did battle and win that game. I'm not sure how many more times you can kind of do that before you can replenish that roster, right? I don't think you can continue playing with very minimal bench in this league. Not right now, anyway. So if JMU seemingly much more healthy and prepared for a game like this, obviously one that neither team really wants to lose, of course. But yeah, I'm going to favor JMU. They've already won the first one, and I think it's going to be tough for ODU to continue on this run with what they're going through on their roster right now. But we'll see what happens. And then underneath that, we've got the battle of the teal and Kelly green specifically. Do you want to give us the first outlook or thought process on Coastal going up to Marshall and Huntington, West Virginia to kick off another 4 p.m. tip?
Yeah, they just played a few weeks ago, and Marshall beat them by 13 in Conway. Like I said, Coastal's coming off kind of a tough loss that they let slip a little bit against JMU. And but Marshall's coming off a disappointing loss to Georgia State at home. So I'll go with Marshall, obviously, just because you can't really pick Coastal right now. But I do like what I saw a little bit out of Coastal. It'll be interesting. Mulabea is still out. It's just like I said, like they can't afford to have guys out when two guys are out for the season redshirting and one player got kicked off the team before the season. You have 10 guys, so you can't really afford to miss guys, and they're missing some. They're missing a guy right now, so it'll be interesting to see if Coastal can dirty it up. Though I do think it's winnable for Coastal, but I'll say Marshall.
I will favor Marshall as well. Like you said, getting that kind of surprising loss to Georgia State probably gonna piss them off a little bit. Get that heat going, that fire going back underneath them to get back on the right side. And like you said, unless Coastal can win a down dirty defensive battle. Which, again, they've already kind of proven that Marshall head-to-head could win this game. So I'd kind of favor them to do that again in this one. But it wouldn't surprise me if it was a little bit closer because now Coastal's got a game of experience and knows some of their tendencies. So it wouldn't surprise me if this game was actually a little bit closer than that first matchup there. Georgia Southern, it's the battle of the birds, the battle of the Eagles. Georgia Southern travels to Hattiesburg to play Southern Miss. This one a 4:30 tip, 3:30 Central Time on ESPN Plus. These two teams, we say, we're tied there at the 4-6 mark. So who gets the jump? Who ends up on top of who in the standings in this one?
I'll go with Georgia. I'll go with Southern Miss. Just being at home, we've kind of documented the struggles of away teams, and Southern Miss had a good first half against Arkansas State. Kind of just let it go in the second half. But yeah, I think mainly just because they're at home, and I think, like we said, we documented the struggles of away teams and Southern Miss. If I don't know what the crowd's going to be like, but that can be a tough environment to go into as well.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what you said, because I was kind of hark a little bit on something similar. Georgia Southern 3-8 on the road. Southern Miss 7-2 at home. So absolutely what you said favors that outlook from the outside going in for sure. I just like this one because it's the battle of the birds. You know, it's the two Eagles, somewhat similar logos, obviously not in color, but the fact that they're both kind of the beak to the feathers on the head aspect. So yeah, kind of an interesting matchup for that one. This is the matchup that I had kind of referred to earlier with ULM traveling to Troy. yeah, when you look at the overall records, you say team at the top versus a team at the bottom, Troy's going to win easily. But I'm not so sure if we're going to see that with where ULM has been playing people a little bit tough in these last 3 games, maybe 4 if you say a 6-point loss to Louisiana before the loss to App State. Include that 4-game stretch where they've kind of been a lot more competitive. But do you think Troy outclasses them here, or do you think that ULM does stand a chance to continue surprising?
Nah, I'm gonna go Troy. They're at home, 3-game win streak, so they're starting to find their footing a little bit. And like we said, they're probably the second best team in the Sun Belt. And yeah, I think it's just gonna be a little bit too much for ULM.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think the streak ends just like you said, and we've talked about 2-8 on the road for ULM. So a big time struggle. Now it won't surprise me to see this be a little close though. I just think ULM is scrappy. What they seem to not have enough of is outside perimeter shooters that can bring them back. So if Troy gets up early, maybe they could kind of coast a little bit and just keep outpacing ULM by a little bit and win the game by 8 or 9 points in the end. But it didn't feel that close. I feel like it could be one of those types of games, but we'll see. ULM surprised me twice last week. I mean, I thought they would keep it within reach against South Alabama in that first game. I would not have favored them to win again in that second game. I figured a little revenge or retribution was coming from the Jags side of things. I didn't expect them to go win 2 in a row against that team, but they did. You think we're going to have a battle of the birds on the other side? Now we got a battle of the cats, kind of. I mean, the Red Wolves are more of a dog, but the logos look kind of similar in that regard. Red Wolves travel on the road to San Marcos to play, like you said, a little bit of a Texas State team that battling some injuries, but could be pretty prominent if they got everybody on the roster and healthy.
Yeah, this be the first road win I take. So I'll take Arkansas State. Obviously the best team in the conference, one of the best coached and most skilled teams I think in all of mid-major basketball. And they're finally starting to show it a little bit more consistently. So yeah, I'll go with Arkansas State, especially with you never know who's going to be healthy with Texas State either.
True. And I feel like the Opinion's been on a huge run here, man. He's been hitting every shot you can think of. He has not really cooled down. So if he's shooting good, yeah, I agree with you. Arkansas State takes this one. Yet again, to me, this is one of those ones, though, that like the Vegas odd books may have it like a double-digit spread. I'm not sure. I haven't looked at that. It wouldn't surprise me if they did. But I maybe favor keeping this game relatively close with Texas State's home record being 7-2 at this point. So feisty, and they're not going to let anybody come into their house and beat them easily. So it'll be interesting to see if it's at least a close game in that regard. Okay, easily the nightcap because it starts a couple hours after all these other games have ended. We have South Alabama traveling to Louisiana for an 8 p.m. 7 Central tip. Again, all games on ESPN Plus, easy to find for those of us, obviously watching all these throughout most of the season at this point already. Does South get back on the right track, or do the Cajuns win a game there at home in the Cajun Dome?
Yeah, I'll take South Alabama to get back on track on the road. They have to, like, after those two brutal losses, you have to get on track before the season starts spiraling too quick. And this is a good opponent, but it's not like the toughest opponent. They're not going into Arkansas State, or they're not going into like JMU or App State or anything. So this is a very winnable game for them, and I do think they get back on track just because I think they have to.
I agree. I 100% with that. They have to. They cannot afford to drop another one like this, because then at that point, it's not only just the record and the standings. It's now like you're worried about this team, a roster of guys who do they start getting frustrated with each other? Do they start arguing? Does that lead to problems in the locker room? I mean, all kinds of stuff can happen when you go on a bad losing streak, especially when you were so high up in the standings previously. It was all going so well there for a little while. So they have to end it now. The thing, again, we'll talk about the records. Louisiana at home, 4-9, one of the worst home records in the conference. So relatively easy spot for South Alabama to get back on track. This one, I think, could be more of a blowout, to be totally honest with you. If they're fired up enough and Louisiana's not playing a very good game, especially how they have not played all that great at home, I think South could get back on track and show that they could be right back in the race even after a not so great week they just had, specifically against the Warhawks of ULM. I guess we'll save the power rankings for the next time because, again, they're probably so much different than what you would put out on Sunday. And we're about to have Saturday games where you'd also change it again by this Sunday. So we'll definitely push those out on Twitter or X once you get those up on Sunday. Any last thoughts before we get into this? I know we also want to mention that we are working towards a MAC Sunbelt Challenge show for you guys, specifically teaming up with some guys specific to the MAC conference. Even if we can't work that out, Zach and I will definitely do our due diligence and homework to bring some interesting aspects to some of those games before next Saturday, because that's when all those take place on those return games. But any other news or note you want to cover here, Zach?
No, it should be some interesting games tomorrow, and games are on Wednesday, I think. Yeah, games are on Wednesday because the MAC Sunbelt Challenge on Saturday gives extra day to travel. So, yeah, it should be interesting. And then, of course, the MAC Sunbelt Challenge has been a success, I think, both years. Not just because the Sunbelt's winning a lot, but I think it's just good comparable competition for both leagues. So, yes. Yeah, that should be fun as well.
Yeah, I think you nailed that. I mean, those two leagues just make sense to kind of go up against each other. Kind of happens in bowl games a lot for football. So go ahead and bring. I wouldn't say any of them are rivalries at this point, but some kind of like little contempt, in the background that you may linger from football season.
I mean, it's also better than playing like bye games, like where you go and get blown out by Auburn or somebody, or the opposite way where you bring an NAI school in and you beat them by 50. Like this helps you find out a lot more about your team than those games.
Yeah, it's more of those. Oh gosh, what do they call those bracket buster type games they used to have? It's not exactly right because there's obviously some teams that are all both towards the bottom of the standings. And the nice part about this challenge is they don't book these matchups at the beginning of the season.
Yeah, they wait till the net rating.
Over. Yeah, they use RPI and strength of schedule and a couple different metrics to kind of help shape so that the matchups are interesting and pit teams that are like
try to make them even as possible.
Yeah. So it makes it a really cool aspect that you don't really get in football, right? But basketball can kind of make those changes a little bit closer with the ease of scheduling, I guess you could say, because when the games are going to happen, you just don't know necessarily who it's going to be until a little bit closer to time. But yeah, be sure to tune that. We're earmarking that one for a Thursday show, live Thursday show, as best we can do for you next week. But again, no matter what ends up working out, at the very least, Zach and I will bring you previews for those Saturday matchups. And we appreciate everybody tuning in, and we will catch you guys next week.